morning, gentlemen. Today, the subject of my talk is Iran. Iran, as you know, is a very important country in Central Asia, and it is at daggers drawn with the United States. Why I'm talking now is because Iran has sided with the Russian state, and is going all out to help Russia in its war with Ukraine. There must be something very deep between the United States and Iran that Iran has taken such a drastic step. I will now examine the incidents of history which have taken place, which has made America persona non grata in Iran. I think we go back to 1941. That was a time when the father of the Shah of Iran, the present Shah, Reza Pahlavi, was deposed. And he was deposed for a simple reason, that he was supposed to be pro-German. That was the time the Russians and the British invaded northern Iran, and there was a good chance that the Russians would capture Tehran and the Shah would be arrested. But he wasn't given a way out, a sort of a safety valve, that look, if you abdicate in the favor of your son, we will support him, and at the same time, you go away. And he had to leave ultimately. He first went to South Africa, and ultimately I think he went to Mauritius and he died there. But his son took over power in 1941 and became the Shah. He was a very young man at that time, Reza Pahlavi, but he was a man with a vision. But he was not strong, and he just ruled as a puppet of the British. In 1954, there was a crisis in Iran, and a chap called Mosaddegh took over and became the prime minister. Now, this man had great vision, a great ambition, and he wanted to depose the Shah and take over power himself. Now, this was the time when the General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the President of the United States, you're not going to countenance this particular thing happening. And so he authorized the CIA to intervene in Iran. During the period 53-54, Mosaddegh was all-powerful, and the Shah then left Tehran and went away to Rome and Italy, and then the CIA got into the act. They created a palace coup, and Mosaddegh was asked to resign. The Shah came back. Mosaddegh was tried, sentenced to 3 years in prison, and put under house arrest, and he died in 1967. The Shah now became all-powerful, but as he had been put in power by the CIA, he was beholden to the Americans. He was beholden to the British. And as the Russians had relinquished their rights and gone away from Iran, he went away from the Russian sphere of influence and came into the American sphere of influence. One of the reasons why he came in was that America bankrolled him and at the same time supported him. And I'll say this much about the Shah, that he was a very progressive man. He believed in secularism, and this is what he introduced in Iran. Probably his alma mater, the man he admired, was Kemal Atatürk, who was the president of Turkey. And he had gone about modernizing Turkey. Probably the Shah had that sort of a vision to modernize Turkey. But he committed a grave mistake. A mistake in the sense that he did not build up any support with the Iranian clergy, that the Shia clergy. Iran is a Shia nation. And the Ayatollah, who was one of his opponents, Ayatollah Khomeini, he was exiled and sent away to France. And the Shah was all in all. He began to be thinking of grandiose schemes for Iran. But at the same time, he was a very ruthless man because over the period from 41 to 54, he had been weak. But after the ousting of the Prime Minister and the coup by the CIA, he was all powerful till 79 when he abdicated. Now, this period is, I wouldn't say what you call it, good or bad for Iran, but probably I would say the Shah failed. Why did he fail? Because he couldn't come to build up grassroots support with the clergy and the Iranian people. And now the Iranian people are not happy to be modernized the way the Shah wanted it. And there were so many other wheels between wheels going because the Middle East at that time was flooded with anti-Americanism and Iran was not an exception. Now the Americans, I tell you, as I've already maintained, they cannot be relied. Initially, they were even in favor of Ayatollah Khomeini, who with American support came back to Tehran. When he came back to Tehran, there was what is known as the People's Revolution, and people who have spent up emotions against the Shah for so many years suddenly erupted. And at that time, the Americans didn't support the Shah. It's a surprise to me and to many other people that the elite Iranian military divisions, which numbered almost 400,000 of the Iranian army, just caved in to an unarmed uprising of civilians and the common people. And that's a fact of history. At that time, if the United States had backed Reza Pahlavi, the Shah, perhaps things would have been different. But Jimmy Carter, who was the president, had different ideas. I mean, I think he was one of the very weakest presidents the Americans have ever had. And what really happened after that was that our good friend Carter just sent the Shah away. The Shah then left Tehran on the advice of the Americans as he was suffering from cancer, came down to New York where he was allowed to have some treatment, but then Carter didn't want to keep him in America. He didn't want to antagonize the Iranians. And at that time, some things very serious happened because unknown to the Americans, Khomeini was basically an anti-American man. And though it was not known to him, certain elements of the Iranian revolution went and made about 50 or 60 American diplomats as hostage. And over the period, they were dispersed in various places so the Americans could rescue them. In fact, a rescue attempt had been made by Carter, and the American helicopters had landed in Iran, but there was an accident, and the leader of the party which had come there spoke to Carter and told him that the rescue operation is going to fail. And Carter told him, okay, back off, come back. So it showed the weakness of Jimmy Carter. And this emboldened the Iranians. And they kept these people there for 444 days till a lot of money was paid. And then the Iranians released them. Now, all this makes a very sad story. But the net result of this was that America has not had a diplomatic presence in Iran for the last 43 years. But at the same time, America has been having the urge to be friends with Iran. They want to be friends with Iran, but Iran is not playing ball. Iran has not forgotten that the Americans had propped up the Shah for 38 years. And the Shah had been a repressive ruler as far as Islamic fundamentalists is concerned. And his modernization schemes were not taking off. People were not happy with it. Reza Pahlavi was an autocrat and he didn't want to have a constitutional monarchy, and that's his fault. He wanted absolute monarchy, and for that he paid with his price, with his kingdom, with his rule, with his crown. He ran away, escaped. And the Americans did not even help him to get asylum in America, and he had ultimately to go place to place and eventually landed in Egypt where Anwar Sadat, who was the president of Egypt, gave him refuge. He died then in 1980, I think. It's very sad and doesn't show the Americans to be in good light. But at the same time, the Iranian revolution has decided that America is the great Satan and they are not going to countenance any peace with them. They are going ahead with nuclear weapons. A nuclear deal was worked out and everybody knew it was a farce, and it's only Donald Trump who realized that this farce should not go on, and he scuttled the nuclear deal. The basic purpose of the nuclear deal was to try and keep Iran away from nuclear weapons. It failed. Because once Donald Trump withdrew the Americans from the nuclear deal, Iran had a free-for-all. And Americans must realize that these sanctions have really no meaning. They had applied sanctions on Iran for the last 2 or 3 decades, but what's happened? Nothing. Iran still survives. You need something more than just sanctions. And now the situation is very, very dangerous because Iran is very angry with the Americans, and they have given their latest drones, including the kamikaze drones, to Russia. And what the Russians have done? They have used those drones for a massive attack in Ukraine, in the power centers, in the communication centers, and Ukraine is ablaze. And the Americans can't do a damn thing. And that's what really matters. So when you are tracing why Iran and the United States are enemies, the problem dates back to 1954 when the Shah was reinstated, because at that time the Shah had fled Iran and the Iranian Prime Minister was going to declare a democracy and a parliamentary form of government. But the CIA carried out the coup, as I told you, and they got the Shah back, and Mossadegh had to go and spend time in house arrest, 3 years jail and then house arrest. And then the Shah, instead of being a wise man, continued his megalomaniac dreams, and net result was he was the most unpopular man in Iran. And one of the reasons which is propounded as why the Iranians had captured all these diplomats as hostages is because they were thinking they'll be able to bargain with the Americans to get the Shah back, to stand trial for his crimes and to be executed. Now when you trace that sort of a history, Iran is now unforgiving and it's entirely on the side of the Russians. If you recollect, they had also given their airfields to the Russians to use their sworn bombers to bomb Syria. That's a few years back. So that should have been the warning to the Americans. But now where do we go from here? Iran is firmly on the Russian side, and the Americans perhaps do not know what to do. If so, one lesson we can draw is that the American policy has always been incoherent. They don't know who is their friend, who is their enemy. I just cannot think how the Americans allowed Khomeini to come back from France to Tehran, and they still thought they would be friends with the Khomeini regime, and they dumped the Shah. So that is the point. They don't stand by their principles, by their friends. Same thing happened in Afghanistan, and now they are propping up Pakistan. It's going to be the same thing story there. Well, gentlemen, I have given you a genesis of the problem between the United States and America. I hope you like it. Please share this video with others and subscribe to my channel.